Hello and welcome to another video by Rick Miracle Me in my series Freemasonry and Satanism. Well, this ought to be an interesting conversation. In my series Freemasonry and Satanism, for one thing, it seems that Jewish people, certain Jewish people, are behind the Freemasons, are behind the Jesuits, are behind the Illuminati. Obviously, from any research at all, behind the Kabbalah, created the Kabbalah, and so much more. Or are the Jews being used by the Illuminati, the Freemasons, the Jesuits, the Vatican? There's a lot of batting back and forth. People blaming, it's the Jews. No, these mystical forces are using the Jews. And then, of course, the million-dollar question is, should we be talking about Jews? That's the no-no on planet Earth. They'll call you an anti-Semite. You can talk about the Hawaiians. You can talk about the Arabs, the Iraqis, the Chinese, the Russians, the Argentinians, the Eskimos, but no talking about Jewish people. You're anti-Semite. You're evil. The Jews refused to assimilate many years ago with the Christians. And of course, before Christianity, Jesus himself arrived, and he was rejected and crucified in the Middle East. And then years later, Muhammad came, the prophet, with the establishment of Islam, and the Jews rejected him. And obviously the Jews didn't join the Buddhists or the Hindus or the Zoroastrians of the Iranians. So who and what are Jews? Are they a race of people? Are they a religion? Jews. Are they white? Are they black? Do they all look like one another, like maybe the Mayans in Mexico? So there are dozens of books behind me, books I've made videos on, and the Jewish question has been asked throughout the ages. And something called the Jewish problem has existed throughout the ages. Why? Why? Why, I ask? It's no small thing. With the book I went over, The Jewish Utopia, Series 67, Protocols of Zion, Series 8, behind me, and many other books, they're bent on controlling the world, dominating the world. So it might behoove the rest of us to ask the question, who and what are the Jews? We know what Christians are. We think we know what witches are. We know what the Buddhists are. We know what the Mayans are, the Eskimos, the Aborigines in Australia. But nobody knows what is a Jew. Is it a DNA-based thing? Is it a religion? Is it numerous religions? Are there several factions of Jews? So if people were hating Jews specifically, and if they were really going to use the literal meaning of the word Semite, Semite I think is applied to people from the Middle East, the Arabs who are brown, Semites. And you'd have to hate the Arabs, the Iraqis, the Afghans, the people living in Turkey, Lebanon, Jordan, all of the Middle East, Egypt, if you hated Semites. But they've applied it to people hating Jews, engulfing all of that. So again, I think it's just something that was fabricated to shut people up and not have them talk about the Jews. Who else has the Anti-Defamation League and many other organizations? Who else has the largest political action committees, the PACs, soliciting money and power from the government, controlling politicians? Who else but certain Jews? And I use that word certain because it's not all Jews. Even some Jews that are famous. In the book behind me, series number 'To Eliminate the Opaque'. Go watch these videos. Got numerous 2-hour videos, and I'll be looking at these books again. But the leader of the Jewish Congress in the USA. That's no small man. The leader of the Jewish Congress in the USA, Rabbi Marvin Entelman. He tells all. He's what you call an Orthodox Jew or a Torah Jew. Those are the, apparently, from our understanding, I'm a Christian, the decent Jews, the good Jews. Then there are the other Jews, the ones into the Kabbalah, and the ones into the Talmud, Zohar, and other books that are the bad Jews, the ones into mysticism, the ones behind the usury, lending of money, taking over countries and politicians and the banking systems, even writing books and gloating about their own repeatedly and repeatedly and repeatedly. I got some of the books behind me. I made videos on it. But look at this one. The Magnificent Rothschilds. The people who were involved, even with the Balfour Agreement during World War I, the Rothschilds, the banking system of Germany, of Italy, of Britain, of France, everywhere. And in 1913, they conquered the USA, creating the Federal Reserve, which is not federal. It's as federal as Federal Express, and that's not federal. Ironically, the Rothschilds, 100+ years ago, controlled the courier services like the Federal Express all over Europe so they could take a sneak peek at the mail they were carrying. I guess that was a financial advantage, you think? But look at the book, The Magnificent Rothschilds. So I've got some more books to read. This is another one I've got to read. History of the Jewish People, Cecil Roth. Cecil Roth wrote this one. Can you just imagine what's in the history of the Jewish people? If he's going to call the leader of the Illuminati, per Fritz Springmeier, the Magnificent Rothschilds. The people who control the USA money supply, who have crashed the system 8 times. I guess those people would think that he's magnificent. They've changed the whole world in the last 100 years since they took over the USA money supply. They brought us World War I 6 months later after they took over the USA money supply. World War II, 9/11, and probably World War III. Probably behind the chemtrailing of dumping chemicals in the sky, bringing us the weaponized microwaves, 4G network, wireless 5G network. Microwaves that harm us. Monsanto foods. And I just learned something seriously disturbing, if it takes something like this to make people upset. Glyphosate. Apparently all over Europe, glyphosate is in the beer. I know what you're thinking. Not my beer! But yes, and it causes serious problems. Apparently, they spray the crops, the wheat, barley, whatever, with pesticides and herbicides, or they alter the DNA, the genes of the barley and wheat and other ingredients by genetic manipulation, making those cells not the same, not the way Mother Nature made them. So not only are they wheat or barley, but they also have the cellular genetics of pesticides or herbicides killing plants. So that's what it's designed to do. So then when you eat it or drink it, in the case of beer, it inflames your body so that the glucose in your body doesn't go into the cells of your body, and as insulin is supposed to make that happen. And a lot of people know that diabetes is on the rise because of this inflammation problem. So it's drinking beer and eating the GMO foods that maybe are causing it, and you add that to the weaponization of microwaves with the 5G network and the existing Wi-Fi and 4G, etc., expanding everywhere, you got yourself a recipe for disaster. Now again, who are the Jews? What are the Jews? Certain Jews. A lot of Jews have been trying to warn us. Benjamin Friedman, if you doubt me at all, please go look him up. I did. I posted his audio, his famous speech, on a couple of my videos. But they warn us. Henry Macow in Canada, famous author, Jewish author, PhD. He wrote the book Illuminati, the Cult That Hijacked the World. So the magnificent Rothschilds are the leader of the Illuminati. I could go behind me and just pull books off this shelf for the next hour or two to connect the dots of what I'm talking about. Like the one I just talked about, Henry Macow, famous Canadian PhD Jewish author, Illuminati, the Cult That Hijacked the World. Look at the all-seeing eye on the back of the dollar bill. Look at it on the front of this cover. Look at the upside-down star, symbol for the devil, with the horns on top. Go watch my videos, Series 2. Bloodlines of the Illuminati. If you can get this book, it's worth it. Series 9. Look at the blazing sun, the pyramid in the back, the skull and bones, and many pages on the Rothschilds. The magnificent Rothschilds. Look at the symbols. Many pages in this book on the Rothschilds. Many videos on YouTube. Go listen to Fritz Springmeier. The magnificent Rothschilds. You think so? What makes them so magnificent? Taking over the world, causing world wars, murdering so many people. What is in the mind of people who would do that? So the book today, and this is series 190, getting closer to 200. Then I think around 200 I'm going to regress and maybe go back to the beginning and go through each book again and make a part 2 or a part 8 or a part 5, whatever the next part is, because my knowledge is ever expanding. But this book, maybe the question is, who are the Jews? What are the Jews? Maybe we can gain a little insight and try to figure it out. Look at this picture. I don't know about you, but it's a little disturbing to me. Those men apparently are Jewish men. They have wings on. And of course, right in the front, they want to display a little boy with wings. So what do you think that means? And then tie that together with Jewish eugenics by John Glad. So I've been reading this. So let me just get started. Let's see, when was it published? Jewish eugenics, like genetics, like cloning. They talk about all that in this book. I highly suggest you get it because this is important. Remember, Hitler was into trying to build a super master race. And apparently Hitler was part Jewish and financed and controlled by the secret societies, the Illuminati, controlled by the Rothschilds, who also helped create Israel, even have a Rothschild Boulevard over there, involved in the Balfour Agreement, the agreement to have Britain win the war that it was losing if they promised to give the certain Jewish people, the Zionists, the land of the Palestinians. And apparently it's much bigger than that, something called a Greater Israel. And you can go on Yahoo image site and look that up. And the prophesized biblical property lines of the new country will be from the Tigris Euphrates River in Iraq down to the Nile on the Egyptian border. And maybe that explains a lot about what's going on in 9/11 and World War I and World War II and so much more. Revolutions galore, millions upon untold millions murdered of people, and they're into eugenics. And I've been learning there's two types of eugenics. One is to build up your own race to be some kind of godly character, slightly into maybe homosexuality. I mean, who else would put a picture of a little boy naked? I knew a guy that I worked for at a major aerospace company. For 10 years I worked there, but I was assigned to this guy. He was called the vampire rapist. And apparently he was abducting young women, drinking their blood at home, and discarding their bodies into the woods. He finally was caught. But my point is, on his desk was a picture of his little boy with his pee-pee out, peeing. So if you did have to go have a meeting with your boss, you had to look down at this little boy with totally naked like this. And of course, we're all aware of the gay marriage thing and things like HGTV with all the shows remodeling homes, and numerous of the couples buying homes are either gay women or gay men. They're trying to normalize it. The same people who are trying to bring us a global new world order and destroy Christianity. This is no small thing, I keep saying. It's huge. It's a problem. And it's not going away. But who are the Jews? What are the Jews? So some of the tables of contents in this book is to be or not to be. That's page 12, page 19. Jewish intelligence, silent Holocaust, human particularism, Jewish particularism, infiltration theory, the reassessment of vocabulary. Are Jews Jews? See, I can ask these things and they'll ridicule me and scream at me, people. I've had comments in my videos. And here in this book, they can talk about themselves. Are Jews Jews? So like some Jews will say, you can't talk about Jews, you can't make jokes about Jews, but we Jews can talk about Jews, we can make jokes about Jews. And I'm thinking, why is that? Everybody can talk about and investigate the Egyptians, the Mayans, there's many books on that topic, Sumerians, the Hawaiians, and any culture at all. The American Indians, the Indians from India, the Buddhists, the Chinese, the Japanese. All kinds of interesting books on those cultures and people. But you're not supposed to investigate who are Jews, what are Jews. I suppose there's something to hide. Darwinism, I'm not going to read all these titles. Judaism and Science, Zionism, it's in this book. The popular image of eugenics, Eugenics and Hitler. It says Hitler right in here, page 67. The Holocaust, Eugenics and Camouflage, Abortion, The Paradoxical Attitude, A Microchronology of Jewish Eugenics. All right, so moving on here. Just going to read what I highlighted. You can get the book. I don't want to do an audio book. And like I said behind me, I said this before, half of these books behind me are trying to expose the deception going on in the world, and the other half are part of the deception, like this book. The person who wrote this book was not trying to portray eugenics in a negative way. But if you're a discriminating reader, thinker with discernment, well, you make up your own mind. I'll just read here. While a great exodus of Jews from the Russian Empire that lasted from 1880 to 1913 aroused sympathy within the already existing community of Western Jews, the way of life of the former Shita dwellers was also a source of discomfort among the prosperous Hebrew Englishmen, Germans, and Americans, whose aspirations were largely assimilationist, Jews in England or Germany or even America who wanted to assimilate. They had acquired a lot of money. They didn't want to talk about this huge Jewish problem, even though they were rich Jewish people, who saw the sudden influx of poor relatives as comprising their own social positions. So a lot was going on before World War I, and this guy's talking about 1880, 20 years, 1914, 34 years prior to World War I. And World War I apparently was some kind of retaliation eventually after World War I in 1917, when they had the Bolshevik Revolution, where all the Bolshevik Jews were sent into Russia to abduct the Tsar and his family, murder all them, and proceed to kill 100 plus or minus million people, Christians and other good people, Russians, from 1917 till 1927 and beyond. The country was blocked off. There was a big curtain while the murder was going on. Can you just imagine it? 100 million people, the screaming and the insane suffering, the people that were getting revenge because the Russia had put punishment or laws on the Jews previous to that for the previous 100 years. Why? And for the last 2,000 years, wherever the Jews had went, they were exiled or banished from countries, even banished from Rome, even banished from Spain and Britain, elsewhere, over and over. There are videos on YouTube where they say 90 different countries have exiled or banished the Jews over 2,000 years. It's called the dispersion, the diaspora. It's well known. Now there's something called Aliyah, where Jews, if you can just imagine it, from all over the world are making their way back to their historic homeland, so they would have us believe. Or is it a huge deception? What is going on planet Earth? Obviously some insane, crazy people in charge, and they have some very nefarious plans for us. In 1885, a 25-year-old Austria lawyer and atheist journalist who saw himself as a German and who at one point even proposed a mass baptism of the Jews, published a utopian novel with his own solution for the situation. So they needed a solution for the situation. Who are the Jews? What are the Jews? Why did they have this thing for hundreds of years, 1,000 years, called the Jewish problem? And they did have a Jewish problem. Like I said, for 2,000 years, they were exiled, banished, policed, or restricted, even burned at the stake, imprisoned. Why? And not all Jews. You have only to wait it, you have only to want it, for it not to be a fairy tale. Sorry about this. Some of these sentences are awkward. You have only to want it for it not to be a fairy tale. A year later, he followed up with the Jewish state. This would be Theodore Herschel. We made a book review about him. An attempt at a modern solution to the Jewish question. His name was Theodore Herschel, and he is considered to be the father of Zionism. The proposal was to establish a state, not necessarily Palestine, where hard agricultural work would cure the new arrivals from the Pale of Settlement of the ghetto culture. So like I said, there's two things to this eugenics. One is to build a super race of super intelligent people who apparently are into some activities where they all run around naked with wings and naked little boys. And then they want to rebreed the rest of us to be a lower form of being. Whether they use chemicals or genetic manipulation, social engineering. And they're doing it. Anybody can see it. Remember the Pokemon chips that came out and all the children had them? And how many of these young people today look like Pokemon characters? Everywhere. I was talking about that with somebody today. And we laugh about it. But it's not funny. Herschel's partner in Zionism, the popular eugenicist into eugenics, Max Nordau, saw Herschel's proposal as straightforward eugenics. So they want to screen everybody and find out who's a Jew, who's not a Jew. A lot of people know they're after everybody's blood and all these things with family trees. They're popularizing that so everybody will go get tested. And they want to get all the pure, a certain type of DNA, over in Israel, excluding everybody else. But the rest of us, they want to further dilute and mix together. Unbelievable. Let me show you a clip.
Ça va faire parler. Mais l'objectif, c'est relever le défi du métissage. Ce n'est pas un choix. C'est une obligation. Si ce volontarisme républicain ne fonctionnait pas, il faudra alors que la République passe à des méthodes plus contraignantes encore. Nous devons changer, alors nous allons changer.
Hardly anyone imagined just 20 years ago that the native French population would be finding itself in a rapidly decreasing minority here.
The evidence is clear. Some certain elites who control our world are involved in some kind of social engineering to create a multicultural world, excluding themselves. If you're not Jewish, you're not about to immigrate into Israel. And they do have the program called Aliyah, where Jewish people from all over the world, from wherever they are, North Pole, South Pole, East, West, are all being coerced to return to their Holy Land, or their old Golden Empire land, and they want the pure DNA. Here's another video as an example to prove that this is going on.
Deputy Prime Minister Eli Yishai demanded their expulsion.
אם ייתנו לי את כל הכלים, ואני פועל להשיג את כל הכלים, וזה לא קל. אם ייתנו לי את כל הכלים בלי יוצא מן הכלל, תוך פחות משנה לא יישאר בארץ ישראל אפילו מסתנן אחד.
יש להם שם בית. מה זה גירוש? איזה גירוש? הם שווים הביתה. כל מדינה בעולם מתוקנת הייתה עושה את זה. נהפוך להיות מדינת הגירה, אבל יש כאלה שעוינים את המדינה. ולכן הם רוצים להפוך אותה למדינת אזרחי כל העולם. נביא לפה 1 מיליון אפריקאים, 500,000 פיליפינים, 2-3 מיליון סינים, ושלום על ישראל.
למה זה מאיים שיהיו פה 1 מיליון אפריקאים?
זה מאיים כי לא תהיה פה מדינה יהודית. המדינה שלנו, תקשיב, המדינה שלנו שונה ממדינות אחרות. המדינה שלנו היא מדינה יהודית ודמוקרטית.
So that Israeli leader clearly says, if they allowed all these immigrants from France or China, wherever, to immigrate into Israel, Israel would no longer exist. But that's not what they want to do to the rest of us. They want to dilute any particular unique qualities. They don't want groups of Irishmen or Greeks or Britons or Germans or anything like that. They want one big melting pot, mixing all the whites with the browns and the blacks and the reds, and to not know the truth about this eugenics program. So it's a form of eugenics when they want to dilute a particular race of people, then that would be the rest of the world. And they want to take all of the genes of the Jewish people and make those as pure and as highly intelligent and apparently as beautiful and as muscular, sexy as they can. You think these people have a plan for the world? Here's another clip. If we all don't cooperate, we're going to be gone, irrelevant. Listen to the leader of the Israeli people.
There are significant political changes on the map from day to day. First it was Tunisia, then Egypt, Libya, now Syria. What do all those changes mean for the Middle East? And all that's happening, is it positive for Israel?
Yes. I mean, there may be a transitional period that will create some difficulties, but in the long run, yes, look. It's not that those countries are changing. All countries are changing because the world has changed. And nobody has a choice, either to go with the modern age or to lag behind and really become poor and irrelevant. What's happening is, you know, governments are no longer controlling their own economy. Instead of a national economy, you have a global economy. Now, if you want to enter, you have to follow the new rules of economy.
Exactly.
So if the rest of us don't cooperate, we will be poor and irrelevant. I guess probably dead, too. There's more to this Jewish problem, Jewish question, eugenics, the utopia, than most people are aware. Now, I've been looking at some documents. I looked up Savita Katiloka, however you say that, on the Jewish question PDF, a Catholic doctrine. And I got $39,900 results. So apparently it is an issue, and that was in 1890. So it's been an issue for quite a while. Hundreds, thousands of years. So I got some documents here I've got to read. The causes. This is page 1 of 15. Actually, 1 of 51, excuse me. And here's part 3, the remedies. So the Catholic Church 100 plus years ago was trying to resolve this problem, question, issue. And then I got another document here. The thing I talked about earlier. The German beer industry in shock over Monsanto glyphosate contamination. So who controls our world? And who's putting toxins and poisons in our alcohol? And if we don't like it and go along, we'll be poor or irrelevant. When I talk about the protocols and the Bolsheviks, Jewish people, go look up these documents. The American Jewish Committee, 1921. And I talk about this famous man who's been trying to warn us. Of course, he's deceased now. But Benjamin Friedman's historic speech at the Willard Hotel, Washington, D.C., 1961. Famous Jewish man trying to warn us. I've got, I don't know how many pages here, but the entire speech. You can go listen to it. So what is it with this Jewish genetics? Eugenics, genetics, cloning, making them more intelligent, more beautiful, more superior. Meanwhile, they're working to make the rest of us less intelligent, less superior, less able, less beautiful. All right, move on. So back to the book here. Herschel's partner in Zionism, the popular eugenicist Max Naidu, saw Herschel's proposal as straightforward eugenics. The creation of Israel, Zionism, Aliyah, all the Jewish people all over the world returning. And then popular Linkmarchen, belief in the hereditable of acquired characteristics, lent hope to the scrawny, weak, and inferior Jew. So they needed to use DNA to change the Jew into a something other than a scrawny, weak, and inferior Jew. An image internalized by many Jews would become physically strong, sexually potent. The Ifente coffee house Jews, this image was subsequently transmogrified into a Zionism fighting Jews who established the Jewish state by force of arms. Well, I disagree with that. They didn't establish the Jewish state of Israel by force of arms. They did it through deception, deceiving the whole world, bringing us World War I and World War II. And so much more. People, presidents, whoever were in the way, countries were put into war and destroyed economically. Presidents were assassinated. Peoples were murdered. But I read the words of the book and throw in my 2 cents. Created by Ephraim Moses Lilin, the first Zionist artist, the illustrations were intended to illustrate the idea of Nordi's muscle Jews. I still think there's something sick about putting the little boy on the front like that. but that's me. The writer Stefan Zweig recalled that in this son of a poor Orthodox Jewish woodturner from Doofenbens, I encountered for the first time an Eastern Jew and a Judaism which in its strength and stubborn fanaticism, that's what it says here, had hereunto been unknown to me. All right, I want to try to read some from this book. I don't get very far usually. Too much information and so little time. All right, it says here, they owed a lot to the pioneering research of eugenicist and sexologist Magnus Hirschfeld. So they're equating eugenics, making people more sexy and more muscle and more perfect and more intelligent, with sexologist. The grand unfolding of culture. These are just key words I highlighted. I'm only going to read the highlighted portions. You can go get the book. Recognizing in Washington, D.C., where else, the crucial role played by Jews in intellectual life and politics, and by some Jews in the suppression of the eugenics movement, I resolved to go back to basics and create a chronology of the shifting Jewish viewpoints that have led us to where we find ourselves today. That would be the author speaking. Writing books about Jews used to be far easier undertaken than it is today, with Jewish anxieties over anti-Semitism having been so elevated as to render dispassionate scholar discourse nearly impossible. And I believe part of the Hegelian dialectic, causing something to happen so you can bring about a certain results, like 9/11, thus enabling the Washington political elite to convince the American people and the world that we should destroy all the countries in the Middle East while everybody stood by and watched. What a deception. Back to the book. Another problem is that the very definition of Jewry has become a moving target. After all, to write a book about Jews means to first come up with a working definition of who is a Jew, and that is no easy task. That's what the author says. Formerly, Jews were considered to be descendants of Abraham, and they believed in Judaism. Now both religion and Abrahamic lineage are off base, off the board, as generic definers. So it isn't about the descendants of Hebrews and the biblical stories. Many Jews attach little significance to their Jewishness or are reluctant to have it known, sometimes even to family members. Considering the influence of the Jewish community in America, the mixed attitude of Jews towards eugenics is reshaping the human genome in a number of ways, more about this later, is far too important to be ignored. Many scholars and scientists would vehemently object to being labeled a Jewish geneticist, an anthropologist, historians, etc., on the grounds that the adjective is parochial and even ghettoizing. Given the massive assault on the eugenics movement as a supposedly anti-Semitic ideology of genocide, however, historical veracity required that the distorted image produced over the last 4 decades be rectified. The topic is not merely an important fragment in the rich and vibrant mosaic of Jewish intellectual history. far more important, it will determine the survival of culture itself. The immense Jewish tragedy during World War II has received its due remembrance, and we are all in debt to those who preserved and preserve a memory of the victims. And I've made a couple books reviews. So that Israeli... Well, I accidentally moved my mouse. Kind of messed up the volume there for a minute. But I made a couple book reviews on these two books. And these two authors seem to be convinced that they're building some kind of new religion. And they're basing it on the Holocaust of World War II. But they were preoccupied with 6 million people prior to World War II. There were ads in the newspapers in New York and the world indicating that 6 million Jews were at risk. And they were even publishing material, a book called Germany Must Perish. The Holy Serpent and the Jews, go watch my video or videos on Series 91. And then the Holocaust Dogma of Judaism by the New World Order keystone, Ben Weintraub. So they're focusing on this 6 million Jews during World War II, notwithstanding the fact that 100 million, plus or minus, they say, were slaughtered non-Jews in Russia after World War I, during the Bolshevik Revolution. And who knows how many untold millions communism caused in China, and how many millions since 9/11, and the Israeli Mossad, the intelligence agencies, and other political elites seem to have had a hand in 9/11. How many millions of Arabs have been killed? But we don't have an Arab Holocaust. We don't have a Russian Holocaust. We don't have a Holocaust for the people during World War I, which was not Jews. It was Germans. And Germany was winning the war, and Germany didn't cause the war. Britain's economic control of the world was slipping, so they had to bring us the war. And they needed it to try to bring down the Ottoman Empire in Turkey, because the Ottoman Empire controlled the Middle East, and the Zionist Jewish people couldn't get their hands on the Arabs' lands. So it seems. So there seems to be lots of evidence. That's why I'm doing these book reviews. And eugenics is part of it. And one is they want to build themselves into a much more muscular, higher IQ race, which they apparently are doing. And two, do the reverse to us by multiculturalism and taking away control of the children from the parents, and then causing our society to be destroyed by drugs and alcohol and the New Age hippie movement, festivals and all that, which anybody can clearly see, seems a bit bizarre. And the people don't even know they're being played for fools all over the USA and I'm sure the world. The young people. I was mentioned earlier, I was having lunch and we were listening to these young people talk. One girl and two guys. One was working in this cafeteria. And they were talking about watching some demonic show where this woman was eating people. And they were laughing and giggling and saying it was a great show. And I was thinking, man, where is all this going? Back to the book. The famous geneticist and evolutionary biologist Theodore Dubinsky commented, "Human evolution has forced man to a crossroads from where there is no escape. The choice is between a twilight cultural as well as biological, or as a progressive adaptation of man's genes to his culture, or of man's culture to his genes. By the way, E. Michael Jones, the author of The Jewish Revolutionary Spirit, I made a video on his book, I'll be making some more, wrote another book, The Slaughter of Cities. Back in the 50s and 60s, and they were introducing unordinary people into different cultures, trying to destroy the cultures in cities all over the USA. For example, if a particular city or section of the city was predominantly Irish or German or Italian, etc., they would bringing in, importing into the buildings and community black people, which was unusual and was causing disturbances, and it was meant to destroy and weaken the strength of those particular cultures. And it was intentional, and it's much more detailed in E. Michael Jones' book, The Slaughter of Cities. I'm going to try to get that book and read it and make a video on it. But you can see they're doing the reverse to us, what they want to do to themselves. They are working towards this Jewish utopia. And now they have all kinds of technologies at their disposal, and they've come so far, FEMA camps, dumping chemicals in the sky, mind control, TV, programming, school systems, billboards, magazines. Our culture is being sucked into a cesspool intentionally. So it seems. Back to the book. If we, in the most fundamental fashion, fail to understand even the recent past, not to mention the present, how can we, as a species, ever hope to be worthy of the terrible price paid for our genetic progeny in the form of natural selection? How deceptively banal the phrase now comes across to us, or to cope with our responsibility to posterity. This is not to say that eugenics, including Jewish eugenics, has not been on occasion abused in the most infamous fashion, and I attempt here to objectively lay out the actual facts regardless of whose political ox is gored in the process. The greater part of this book is devoted to the macro chronology. The immediate temptation was simply to gather instances of Jewish advocacy of eugenics. Some 400 are given here. But such a simplistic approach would have been repetitive and frankly tedious. Instead, I have attempted to present this fascinating jigsaw puzzle in all its dynamism, and with all its relationships as a sort of Jewish Easter egg hunt. A Jewish Easter egg hunt? That's kind of a weird sentence. Easter egg, Easter being Jesus' rising from the dead, which the Jewish people, certain Jewish people, deny. Do not for a moment make the mistake of thinking that this is just one more recondite scholarly book devoted to the obtuse intersection of medicine and Judaism. Even now, the ideological struggle documented on its pages determines, to a huge extent, the ideologies underlying the contemporary politics, an even greater topic of our ongoing evolution as a biological species. So is this the Jewish biological species, or the rest of us as a biological species? Africans as a biological species. Germans as a biological species. Prior to World War II, they published that book, certain Jewish people did, calling for the Germany must perish and they wanted the German DNA wiped off the planet. How's that for eugenics? Back to the book. There are many who do not want the facts documented here to come to light. You are reading a book on a topic that supposedly not only does not exist, but one that is even inconceivable. A contradiction in terms. This misapprehension stands in gross contradiction to the grand tradition of Jewish culture and is the product of diligent propaganda manufactured by a heavily Jewish group that itself represents a small minority within the Jewish community. So the good Jews, the Torah Jews, the Orthodox Jews, the God-fearing Jews are the small minority within the Jewish community. The ones that are being destroyed. Frankly, their task was made easier by the fact that most people have only the vaguest notion of what eugenics is, not to mention realizing its enormous importance. The best way to expose propaganda is total honesty to the reader. So read the facts laid out here and judge this political catwalk for yourself. And I've been reading this, and let me tell you, it'll speak for itself. It is not benevolent to humanity, the rest of us. It's malevolent. They put themselves up on a pedestal saying they have a higher IQ than the rest of us. The bulk of the microchronology consists of verbatim quotes. This is the way it was and is without manipulation. For all its excuses, eugenics has been an astounding, indeed an existential success for Jews, molding them into a uniquely resourceful and intelligent people. And the current assault on eugenics by an understandably emotion-driven minority Jewish faction represents a frontal assault on the very essence of Jewry. One facet of eugenics is that of cloning. I get a little worn out speaking. Hope I'm doing all right today. Some days I do better than others. All right, back to the book. One facet of eugenics is that of cloning. We've all heard that in the news. Without any doubt, it will soon be possible to create future Da Vinci's, Beethoven's, Einstein's. Indeed, human cloning may well already be secretly invested in Israel today. Legal specialist Carmel Shalvi of Tel Aviv University writes that the parliamentary debate on cloning went almost unnoticed by the public and the media, that the fear of playing God was a virtual non-issue in Israel. So in Israel, the fear of playing God was a virtual non-issue. So they don't mind cloning and making these reincarnations of people. Wonder who they could bring back. All right, I'm going on to the first topic here. The way it was and still is. Framing the topic. I'm only reading a small portion of this book and talking about the sentences as I come to them. It's 423 plus pages. So if you really want to go dwell into this and get all the facts, as crazy as they are, go buy the book. I'll try to make another video or two, but I've got so many other books I need to revisit and make part 2s and part 3s, etc. Despite perhaps because of the growing threats of assimilation, intermarriage, and low birth rates, listen up now. Despite perhaps because of the growing threats of assimilation, intermarriage, and low birth rates, many Jews are writing about the Jewish future. Many more are thinking and speaking about it. The time is ripe for bringing our desperate ideas together, disparate ideas together, in a collective enterprise devoted to devising a plan or plans of action to preserve the Jewish future. And this book was published when? To put the timeline in context here, (2011). This is 2018. Lots happened since then. There is no reason why one of the oldest continuing human civilizations cannot turn into the newest of technologies, cannot turn to the newest of technologies to enhance its prospects for the future. Wow. So the oldest continuing human civilization, that would be them, and they want to turn to the newest of technologies, that would be the 5G network and other things that are going on, to enhance its prospects for the future. For the first time in our long history, our survival is in our hands and not in those of our enemies. So who is the enemy of the Jews? Certain Jews wanting a global order. I suspect it would be the rest of us. The goyim that they call cow. Like E. Michael Jones' book, The Slaughter of Cities, in the 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s, I'm sure. They were trying to dilute cultures, groups of people, religious histories, lower IQs, drugs, dumbing down of America, the education in schools. So that was by Alan Dershowitz, The Vanishing American Jew. Human ecology transcends political issues, even renders them trivial to the long-term survival of our species, which requires 4 conditions: a supply of natural resources, a clean, biodiverse environment, a population no larger than the planet can comfortably sustain in an infinite basis. You see what we're talking about? They want to control the natural resources, a clean, biodiverse environment, a population no larger, and they're focused on depopulation, the people control our planet, desiring a global order. And at the bare minimum, preservation of our genetic patrimony was what in Yiddish is known as Yitzhak, defined by Manhattan Rabbi Simon Jacobin as good blood and cherished genes. Wow, they got good blood and cherished genes, and I guess they would say the rest of us don't. Personally, I find some of the information in this book shocking. That you can go get the book and realize there are people that would publish a book with that picture on the front. Call me a prude if you want. And these things in the book, I just read the book and think. I wish more people would think. All right, back to the book. And I'm only trying to read my highlighted portions here. I'm up to page 12 and 13. It should come as no surprise that diaspora Jews, the ones who have been dispersed all over the planet for a couple thousand years, who constitute, get this, an exceptionally high IQ group are likewise not having enough children to maintain their population, and this trend is both undermining the quality of the general human gene pool, decimating Jewry in an even more devastating fashion than did the violence of World War II. The eugenics gospel has not gone unheeded in Israel. So they're focused on enhancing the population of the high IQ Jewish people. In a 2006 survey conducted by members of the Department of Nursing in Tel Aviv University, I think that's the second major city in Israel, second to Jerusalem, which has been long sought object for the recapture by the Zionist Jews. And recently we all know that President Donald Trump announces that America recognizes Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. So we can see where President Donald Trump stands. I don't think he asked the rest of we the people what we think. If he did, a lot of people who know anything about prophecy or history would say, heck no! Do you realize what happens next? Armageddon, maybe? The rebuilding of King Solomon's temple? The Jewish utopia dominating the world? 16% of the respondents agreed with the statement, cloning should be permitted for producing individuals with high IQ, and 35% believed that cloning should be permitted for avoiding genetic diseases. Astoundingly, beginning in the late 1960s, a politically active minority within the Jewish community has enjoyed spectacular success in intimidating and abject silence the person supporting the traditional eugenics values of Jewish society. This is an ideological split within Jewry, which coincides with an identical fracture, cleaving popular culture from the grand thrust of modern science. The ongoing Jewish demographic explosion is not a final solution imposed by an implacable outside enemy, but one generated from within the Jewish community itself, albeit with the best intentions. So that, you know, this Aliyah thing where people are being coerced from all over the world, for the last 100 years, by the way, to move to Israel when it was established in 1948. But actually, they were moving there in the late 1800s, covertly. And that was causing a lot of problems in Russia. There was a lot of the Russian citizens who were Jewish weren't loyal citizens to Russia. They had their own plans for dominating the planet, Zionism. Why things happen, don't we all need to know? Denounced by egalitarians, anti-hereditarians, thinkers are racist, anti-Semites, and self-haters, advocates of eugenics found refuge in testing, demography, genetics, and social biology, where popular mythology is barred entrance by so simple a barrier as popular ignorance, even the terminology of these fields. So people who are opposed to this eugenics program, creating these utopian superior people to rule the world, I added that, they want to call them anti-eugenics, anti-Semites even, racist, self-haters. Taboos change over time. During the Cold War, neither the West nor the Soviet Union wanted to undermine the image of their new respective German allies. and Jews on either side of the Iron Curtain did not want to be seen as a fifth column undermining the common effort. I was an early participant in the early days of the Holocaust Memorial movement, having been the chief translator of the Black Book, the Holocaust Library, compiled by Elia Ehrenberg and Vasily Grossman on the horrendous slaughter of Jews in German-occupied Soviet territories. What's the truth? Not surprisingly, the book had been forbidden for publication in the Soviet Union. So the Black Book. While the West had no official censorship, Jews there were also reluctant to dwell upon the topic. Moreover, there was embarrassment, even contempt, among some younger Jews over the older generation's reported passivity and failing to resist their persecutors. So I'm sure a lot of Jewish people today have no idea what all this is about, and they resent anybody having an opinion about Jews that is negative. I know a lot of Jewish people in the community where I live. Some of them I even call friends. I don't think they would ever believe or want to participate in this kind of thinking in this book, in the Jewish utopia. I hope I'm right. While in the 1950s, the future historian Ron Hilberg, 1926 to 2007, insisted on writing his dissertation on the Holocaust, which later became the basis for his destruction of the European Jews. So there's a lot of propaganda out there on these topics. The topic was still impossible, as this may seem today, prescribed by Jewish intellectuals and his advisors at Columbia University. The Jewish German social theorist Franz Neumann warned him that his choice of subject might be his academic funeral. Many publishers rejected the book. Moving on here. Now that the Holocaust topic is no longer taboo, it is eugenics that has taken its place as the pariah. So let us begin with the definition. Eugenics is a social and scientific movement that seeks to replace natural selection with scientific selection. Page 14. No biological population can remain viable without Darwinian selection, and human beings are no exception. And I don't support Darwinian philosophy evolution. I believe in intelligence design, and if anybody does a little homework, they will see that intelligence communities sprung up everywhere after the Great Flood. What happened before the Great Flood? Noah's flood. What about Atlantis and other existing societies and cultures? So there wasn't any Darwinism in any future that can be documented, in my opinion. But that's not what they want people to believe. Eugenics is all about healthy, intelligent children, parental responsibility to future generations. So I'm reading in this book, Parental Responsibility to Future Generations. Wasn't it Hillary Clinton who said the children don't belong to their parents, they belong to the community? Which way is it? I think there's a way for us and a way for them. One for the utopians and one for the slaves. The basic principle is that which has been successfully applied by animal breeders for millennia. Like breeds like. At least usually, if not always. Like breeds like. So in communities all across the United States and Europe, they want to bring in other breeds of people and force them to interbreed with the people there. You don't believe me? Watch this video.
an Sie, dass der Islam, so wie der Bundespräsident Wulff es gesagt hat, zu uns in Deutschland inzwischen gehört.
Sie werden nicht vertreten. Er kann jederzeit dieses Land verlassen, wenn er nicht einverstanden ist. Das ist die Freiheit eines jeden Deutschen.
Wir müssen uns gegen die Nazis stellen. Schon aufgrund unserer Geschichte zwischen 1933 und 1945 sind wir verpflichtet, Flüchtlinge anständig zu behandeln. Dann gibt es ja noch was. Jedes Jahr sterben mehr Deutsche als geboren werden. Das liegt zum Glück daran, dass die Nazis sich auch nicht besonders vervielfältigen. Und schon deshalb sind wir auf Zuwanderer aus anderen Ländern angewiesen.
To me, whiteness is an identity that arises entirely out of oppression. Whiteness is not a culture, it's not a religion, it's not a language, it's simply an oppressive social category. Blackness is an identity that can be plausibly argued.
We have exterminate white people off of the face of the planet to solve this problem.
I think there's a resurgence of anti-Semitism because at this point in time, Europe has not yet learned how to be multicultural. And I think we're going to be part of the throes of that transformation, which must take place. Europe is not going to be the monolithic societies that they once were in the last century. Jews are going to be at the center of that. It's a huge transformation for Europe to make.
Jews are going to be...
Crazy? You think? You think we people need to wake up? Back to the book. Once the continuity of humankind with the rest of the animal kingdom was established, invigorated attempts to improve the human genome became inevitable. Eugenics is, after all, quite simply, applied human genetics. 5 of the first 6 presidents of the American Society of Human Genetics were also members of the board of directors of the American Eugenics Society. So the American Eugenics Society is connected to the Human Genetics American Society. Historically, modern genetics is an offshoot of the eugenics movement, not the reverse. A frequent criticism of the eugenics movement is that it was a distasteful, I'll change the word here, salon culture of the privileged but amateurish or aristocracy. Need something to drink. It is Friday, about 6 o'clock. So I'm probably getting worn out from speaking. I've been busy all day. But back to the book. Sufficient to see that their members numbered among the intellectual elites. I guess a lot of us knew that. Both lists indicate a constant stream of PhDs and MDs, and many Jews are on the list present, no exception in that respect. Although the improvement of health and intelligence is the ultimate goal of the eugenics movement, an even more persistent theme is how to halt the genetic decline. So do they really believe there is a genetic decline existing today? I say they do believe it, but I say also it's not true. I say they believe it because they want to believe it for selfish purposes. They've been doing it way too long. This material was being worked out and discussed 100 years ago. I've got the books, I've made videos. We'll work on some more books and make other videos. World War I, World War II were tools in the arsenal of these people to bring about a changed world. This global order they want, with them as the utopians, the masters. Make no mistake, this has a spiritual component to it. Satanic, Luciferic, fallen angels, whatever you want to call it. It's there. And the next video I make might point that out even more clearer than I've been able to. It's a book about John Dee, the magician to the Queen of England. And in his book, something called, I can't even pronounce it, so I'll show it. Necronomicon. Something to do with the occult. I've been reading it. Fascinating. And remember, the historical, cultural practice of the Jews, according to the Jewish Encyclopedia, the Encyclopedia Judaica, published in 1973 in Israel, they have historically been involved in the Kabbalah, and many Kabbalists were accused of sorcery. Make no mistake. All right. At the root, eugenics is an interdisciplinary conceptualization of the genetic consequences of social practices for current human and future. Applied to animals, it would not be controversial. The counter-transpose was, and still is, an unspoken denial that human evolution is an ongoing process. Hibernization has supposedly eliminated subspecies, so that the fundamental human genotype is now claimed to be virtually immutable, with only trivial intraspecies variations existent. So they're saying we've all evolved to where we are today. There really aren't any subspecies left. But then again, earlier they were saying that it was starting to decline, the quality. Even while conceding that humankind is indeed the product of evolution, proponents of human particularism assume that human beings are the one species that no longer affected by this process. And I'm not going to say that our environment doesn't help change some of us. For example, maybe the hot sun in Africa turned people black, and the lack of sun and the cold weather in Northern Europe made them very white, and the people living in the middle from Spain right on through the continent were kind of brown. Different kinds of defenses against the environment. More water, less water, different kinds of food. Humanity, they argue, is the issue of a single African woman, Eve, and any subsequent or future human evolution is only skin deep. Eugenicists tend to be skeptical of this view, which they regard as rooted in a wishful thinking than in an objective science. So what I'm going to do now is skip ahead. And there are some quotes from people here that I thought I should read from that are quite interesting. Here's a picture. All right. Let's see what it says here. Starts out with the title, A Paradoxical Attitude. How the reader must inevitably ask, has it come about that the fundamental pro-eugenicists thrust, the pro-eugenics thrust, not just of Judaism and Zionism, but of Jewry in its essence and totality, has been so assiduously conceded? I apologize for me having trouble with a couple of these words. Assiduously. But that eugenics has been wed in the public consciousness to a tragic infatuation with the topic on the part of a political figure who put a bullet through his brain in the besieged Berlin bunker. They were I guess, insinuating Hitler. But isn't Hitler supposed to be relative of the Rothschilds? Just saying. Weren't the Illuminati banksters financing Hitler? I've gone over books about that. I'll be going over more books about that. Sometimes you can't get the truth out of these books unless you've done some research and you're thinking. The Jewish attitude towards eugenics is totally paradoxical. We are dealing here with a disconnect between practice and theory. For lack of a proper understanding of the nature of eugenics as a worldwide, the rage has been directed at the word so that a number of alternative terms have been proposed. And they use alternative terms all the time to fool us. Reproductive genetics. Man, I just thought of something. In the news recently, you've probably noticed it, there's been some alarming information about several locations of gene pool banks, sperm and ovaries from women, where the cooling equipment failed, and thousands or maybe more of those, hundreds of thousands, millions of samples have been destroyed. What do you suppose that's all about? If it was just one case, I might buy it. But numerous, one in the news even today, I became a little suspicious. And why are they trying to get blood samples from all of we the people? Things are happening. Reproductive genetics, for example, as if such a beast as non-reproductive genetics could actually exist. It is like writing an encyclopedia article about horses without using the word horse. Paradoxical attitude. Jews are a dynamic, intelligent, and resourceful people whose contribution to culture and civilization is vastly out of proportion to their numbers. How many people believe that? All the books I read by Jewish people trying to give them all kinds of fame, like this one, The Magnificent Rothschilds, and other books I've gone over, say the same thing. The Jews are a dynamic, intelligent, resourceful people whose contribution to culture and civilization is vastly out of proportion to their numbers. Then why, for thousands of years, even the Jews were banished from Rome, Spain, and so many countries, and it was always the Jewish problem, the Jewish solution. And why did the Jews, if they are so intelligent, certain Jews, did they want to crucify the Savior, Jesus Christ? And why did they assist in 9/11 and trying to destroy all the countries in the Middle East? Why did the president say the things he said in the video I just showed on this video? Jewish eugenic practices may often have been inadvertent and highly influenced by outsiders, but their existence can no longer be denied. Jewish eugenic practices, their existence can no longer be denied. Not merely our understanding of the past is at stake, but so too is the genetic future of our planet and species. We owe truth to the past and parental love and responsibility to the future, no less. So they got another highlighted topic here. Some questions. Eugenics has come to be associated with conservative and right-wing politics. In point of fact, its historical roots are just as much in the left as in the right. Now, too, eugenics extends the full length of the ideological spectrum, and unquestionably, this state of affairs will continue into the future. While the assault on the biological paradigm of human behavior was a long time in the making, The assault on the biological paradigm. They're trying to change our paradigm. I had a strange thought today when I was driving back to finish this video. The word deviant. They're trying to make the world a deviance. And what is a deviant? If I use it in this video, will I offend people? It means that they're different. So if our society was a family-valued society with morals like the Ten Commandments, decency, people understand that. And people who are the opposite, like the gay pride parades and the New Agers and wanting not to participate in society and have jobs or do things, that would be deviants. Here was my paradoxical thought. Let's say the world does turn the way they're trying to do it. Like the Mad Max movie or Hunger Games. Whatever. They get their way. Can you imagine 400 years from now, and when certain people reject that way of the culture, and they try to go to create one of the historical family values, you know, like Leave It to Beaver and TV programs like that, they will be called the deviants. In the end times, I guess they say, the right will be wrong and wrong will be right, up will be down, down will be up, and 2 + 2 will be 5. Why? Because they said so. I wonder how long it'll take for people to wake up and put a stop to this nonsense that's taking place, this destruction of our reality. Obviously, the powers that be don't care about the human population. They have ulterior goals. They're letting our infrastructure deteriorate to dangerous conditions. And they seem to be more bent on putting the 5G network online and dumping more chemicals in the sky and more genetic modified foods. The glyphosate in the beer in Europe. Somebody should do some testing in the United States. I'll bet the herbicides and parasites from Monsanto is in the beer in the United States, the glyphosate, and apparently it causes lethargic behavior and bodily actions, making people fatigued and tired and sick, and their blood vessels inflamed, causing diabetes, where you can have your toes, arms, legs, fingers lopped off, lose your eyesight. And I think combining that with the coming online 5G network, maybe they're putting a weapon system in place and to try to change the eugenics of the planet, eliminate the ones they don't want. And here we all are carrying our cell phones with us. All they got to do is turn on some switches. They've got most of our blood samples, and people will start falling like rocks. Just saying. Something's up. All right, back to some questions. While the assault on the biological paradigm of human behavior was a long time in the making, so this assault on the biological paradigm, they're trying to change it, they're admitting has been a long time in the making. Only 8 years passed between the Arab-Israeli 1967 war and the 1975 appearance of the Wilson social biology, the now accepted model of scientific inquiry. That is how long it took science to move ahead to its new synthesis without even bothering to respond to the claims of racial egalitarianism. At the same time, the popular media will support this seductive view of life. Jewish political influence has elevated the Jewish debate over eugenics from a parical topic to a major factor in determining current and future human evolution. And this dualism has huge potential implications which extend far beyond Jewish topics. So I suppose if you can make a far more intelligent and muscular superior person, You could make a less intelligent, weak person or dumbed down person, maybe even be physically strong to be an animal, human farm worker. And by the way, this was one of the beefs the Egyptian had, according to my research, with the Atlanteans before the Great Flood, when Atlantis was sinking, and they actually went to Egypt, and then they went to Central South America, where all the pyramids, the Mayans are. They went different places all over the world. But they brought with them their genetic eugenics manipulating technologies and were actually creating monster-type people. And they had big wars between the Egyptians and the Atlanteans. And apparently it got so far out of hand, the whole planet. That's why God had to bring about the Great Flood to kill everything. And there were remnants of humans saved, even the Hopi Indians. All over the world there are underground tunnels or in the mountain tunnels. And apparently some entities or peoples went and organized these shelters prior to the Great Flood, like Noah's Ark. Think about that. But it was so polluted with all these genetically modified monster-type beings that God had to actually destroy the planet. Is that the way it happened? And history repeats itself. Don't they say that? Alright, let me try to finish this video. Second, should we perhaps reconsider the question of within and between group variance? Is all diversity desirable? We know they're trying to bring about a multicultural community where there really isn't any diversity. Third, we are free to do what we want to do, but we do not decide what we want. Where is their place here for free will and morality? Some questions here. Fourth, the animal-based model of human behavior leaves precious little space for belief in a deity. Wow. Who will restore us to life and our loved ones in some eternal higher sphere. The religious model promised blissful eternal life. What's left now? So fourth, the animal-based model of human behavior, that's why they brought us Darwinism, leaves little precious space for the belief in a deity who will restore us to life and our loved ones in some eternal higher sphere. My next video ought to be interesting on John Dee's book, Necron no Mycon, something to do with the beings that can be summoned, demons. So what is it? Is there demons but we don't have souls? How can the two go together? Alright, moving along. Fifth, what mechanism will ensure biological selection and prevent catastrophic human decline? A recognized requirement for all species. Sixth, should we not prepare for the soon-to-arrive moment when the machine brain created by us will be superior to its makers? Well, we know they have AI, artificial intelligence, working today. You can't even say things in your home where you don't next see a commercial on your internet webpage related to that topic about a lawnmower. Try it. Send an email to somebody saying you want to buy a lawnmower and see how fast the next thing you will show up there's a lawnmower. Or look up a lawnmower, the prices, and you'll see ads all over your pages. And sometimes it seems to me, and my friends have noticed it, it's even things we say or things we say on the phone are keying in these programs. AI is real. They're bringing us some beast system online with the 5G network. proves to be something very interesting in the future. Probably detrimental to all the non-elites. So sixth, should we not prepare for the soon-to-arrive moment when the machine brain created by us will be superior to its makers? Will our place not be in the same cosmic zoological garden along with the zebras and the bumblebees and the speckled trout? Will humans be irrelevant? Seventh, can we adopt rational principles of animal husbandry? Just one example, which breeder would ever consider a mammogram for dogs or horses? I told you I was going to get into hot water with these topics. Eighth, are quality considerations the most urgent peril, or do qualitative considerations constitute a more eminent menace? Clearly, the promised demographic transition is taking far too long. There are too many of us, and the 25th century will unquestionably witness horrible and preventable mass tragedies. Lastly, and I apologize for asking the million-dollar question, what is existence all about? So obviously this Jewish author doesn't believe in God or Jesus or we have souls or even Edgar Cayce and we're here to grow our souls, soul growth. The Muscle Jew, E.M. Leland. So they want to bring about these muscular and little boys where they can have these pictures, these highly intelligent, sexual Jewish people. And then, of course, there's plenty of evidence that they're trying to do the opposite to the rest of us. With the even the book by E. Michael Jones, The Slaughter of Cities. Go watch the videos about that on the YouTube. Just a few more things and I'll finish this video right now. 1939 to 1945. Continuing Jewish support for eugenics, but now Jewish racialist claims must compete the anti-hereditarian's views espoused by figures such as Ashley Montagu. Massive Jewish population losses disproportionately reduce the upper end of the intellectual spectrum. The first claim of a 6 million killed is advanced by Ilya Ehrenberg in Russia in December 1944. So it was a man in Russia who came up with that number of 6 million Jews killed in World War II. Well, how interesting is that? That's as interesting as like an hour or less after 9/11, they said Osama bin Laden did it, and somebody picked up a driver's license and said, look, it fell out of the plane. Abdul Mohammed something. 1948 to 1967, the creation of the State of Israel makes possible the ingathering of the Jews in Palestine. The topic of the Holocaust is largely ignored by the Jewish community. Jewish rejection of Zionism is overcome, and Jewry is defined by its identification with Israel. Continuing support for eugenics among American and Israeli Jews, discoverer of the double helix structure of DNA, makes designer babies theoretically possible. These people control our planet. The Jewish political PACs, political action committees, control our politicians. The Jewish controlled Illuminati banking system, Rothschilds, Rockefellers, Morgans, Schiffs, they control our money, our economic system. The New Age, the New World Order, globalism is real. And it involves how they want to design us and use us, and that they feel that there's too many of us. They need to bring about some kind of population reduction And they could certainly do that with World War I, World War II, and likely do it again with World War III. Just think about it. During those wars, a lot of people were killed, and somebody acquired all those persons' properties and wealth. Think about that. Got some seriously sinister, nefarious people controlling our planet, and they have topics like this they discuss, and things like this that are actually taking place. Like I said, in the news, a huge sperm bank, egg bank, facility collapsed or something. Something was all destroyed. And it was the second or third time in recent times that that's happened. So it can't be a coincidence, statistically speaking. So what do they need those sperms for and those eggs for? Are they planning, like the over there in Holland or Denmark, where they have the seed bank in the side of a mountain, preparing for some gloom and doom world collapse? Were they needing a lot of sperms and eggs, preparing for some world collapse that they are planning on bringing about? And likely using technologies that they're installing today at the taxpayer expense. 1968 to 1975. This is the last paragraph I'll read out of this book. Page 109. The heretofore largely ignored Holocaust is cited as justification for the creation of Israel. Massive exodus of Jews from their ancestral homes in the Muslim world and Eastern Europe. Well, I'm aware, I've read books about it. Even in Iraq, they made deals with the king there to cause a discomfortable situation for Jewish people, so they would both be coerced to leave because they were happy there. Even in Argentina, all over the world, for the last 100 years. What's really going on? The Vietnam War and the American Civil Rights Movement radicalized American Jewish youth. The Holocaust Memorial Movement is launched. The first Jewish attacks on social biology and eugenics. Continued Jewish support for eugenics, but eugenics is more and more frequently presented as the ideology of genocide. So it works two ways. Eliminating people you don't want, genocide, and then making a far more intelligent, muscular species with eugenics. Jewry comes to be defined more by its relation to the Holocaust than to Israel, leading one Jewish scholar to speak of an anti-Zionist period, reaching the Zionist period to the blink of an eye, reducing the Zionist period to the blink of an eye. So, yeah, books I've been reading, even in the Encyclopedia Judaica, show plenty of evidence that it took 300 plus years of this Zionist movement, organizations, Zionist congresses, and people organized all over the world, sending money and plans and controlling politicians and presidents and even assassinating the same. Strong Jewish support for multiculturalism and multi-racism in America, but not in Israel. That's what it says here. On the bottom. All the things I've been talking about. All I talked about in the last 2 hours is in this sentence. I'll say it again. Strong Jewish support for multiculturalism and multi-racism in America, but not in Israel. They want us to live and be reduced to one thing, while they have plans for a superior Jewish utopia. So it seems. Thank you for watching my video. Rick Mariko reporting.